Welcome to the 11th episode of The Mental Breakdown. And my next guest is Parjanya Joshi, who is a PhD student of philosophy. Was something I had intended initially. I ended up pursuing my doctorate in psychology. Still, I always love philosophy. He's also gotten into some martial arts, so we make a connection there. The main theme here is non-dualism and what non-dualism is. It's a difficult concept to grasp, and I think he does an amazing job. So here we go. All right. Hello, Parjanya Joshi, or we can call you PJ, you say, right?
Yeah.
All right. And I go by CD. This is interesting. I'm glad to have you here because so far you're my 11th guest on this podcast, and so far everyone I've interviewed are people from my life in different times. I just met you recently, was on Twitter, and then we got to have a conversation. So I kind of have some ideas I want to talk about. I don't want to just cover the same stuff because that would be boring for both of us, but some of that stuff is actually relevant, and maybe just kind of go over it again. I don't have a huge following here, but I do have a lot of people who are really interested and kind of enjoy this just open dialogue. Most of my friends are all like, I mean, really, I think most people like philosophy, and, but not everyone is a philosopher. In fact, very few people are, well, I mean, like academically, I mean, most people have some degree in attachment to philosophy, but it was something that I set out to do actually when I got my bachelor's in philosophy, and I did intend to be a doctor of philosophy. And then I followed my martial arts career and then started teaching, got into education, and kind of drifted into psychology. Obviously, there's a relationship, philosophy of the mind, consciousness, and all that. But I admire you. I admire you, what you're doing. You're going to be a doctor of philosophy soon. So,
Thank you.
I'm looking forward. You are the, I admire that whole venture. I guess I want to lead up. I'd love to start getting into philosophy stuff, but let's go back and talk a little bit about where you're from. You're from Mumbai, which is I've never been to Mumbai. I'm kind of want to know what it's like growing up there. I've been to New Delhi, which was like really a lot of people. I feel like Mumbai, Bollywood, everything is a little, I don't know, I visualize more glamorous. I don't know, just maybe more modern. Maybe I'm wrong. I don't know which one is actually just to give an idea of what it was like to grow up in Mumbai, because it's like I don't.
So I'll give you I'll tell you this, right? My relationship with the city is always sort of strong but changing. It's I don't know, it's something about the city that I don't think I can really call any other city in India home.
Okay.
Like I'd rather pick a city outside of India than live in any other Indian city, really, given the choice. Like that's not to say that if I get a job somewhere else, I won't go there, but I'm just saying, like, in terms of like feeling at home.
Sure.
But the thing about Mumbai is um, it's a very fast-paced city,
Okay.
right? It's kind of like New York in that sense. It's very nobody really has the time for anybody else's bullshit. Everyone's always trying to get from one place to another, trying to get work done, trying to make money, trying to save money. Bollywood is one sort of part of it, one aspect of it. Um, on the other hand, unlike some parts of New Delhi and some other northern cities and even some cities in the south, Mumbai is not a planned city, or really that well planned.
Oh,
So it's an old city that
okay.
was made by so there were 7 islands that the Portuguese gave to the British in dowry, and
Okay.
those 7 islands originally were the city of Mumbai, which then the port of Mumbai, and then they
Okay.
started reclaiming land around it, and so everything is really sort of haphazardly built
Okay.
over, sort of
Yeah.
layered,
Yeah.
and
Okay.
so the roads are really packed. Everything is really congested. There's no space. Kind of like what um, cities like Hong Kong have done and cities like Singapore have done. So like a lot of the real estate is now going up
Okay. Yeah. Yeah.
because there's
Okay.
no horizontal space, right?
Okay.
Um, so, but then then um, there's a huge uh, um, divide that appears in Mumbai. There are multiple divides. One is like obviously like the Hindu-Muslim divide definitely appears. There are definitely cities of the parts of the city that are more Hindu and the others are more Muslim. It has a past of Hindu-Muslim riots and all of that.
Okay.
But it also has a past of great protest and struggle for independence and
British.
freedoms from the
Okay.
British, right? So that is also part of that, and during that time, like everyone was united. So
Okay.
there's also that part of Mumbai. So the south of Mumbai is a mix between old colonial British
Yeah.
architecture
Okay.
and older residences that are now getting sort of redeveloped and that kind of stuff. Which you can definitely look at the architecture and be like, this is an old Muslim building, this is an old Hindu building, this is an old Parsi building, right? They have like Parsi
Okay.
Irani,
Okay.
a lot of Parsi people living in India. Um, Old Christian buildings. So you can sort of
Okay.
tell this the, like the kind of people that used to live. And then as you go sort of more north, um, you when you come to like the suburbs, they're more the architecture is more contemporary, right? It's more office spaces and um, uh, residential apartment complexes and like high rises and things like that, and like big huge freeways and things like that. So you get to see a lot of this. And then in the north and in the top sort of center north of the city, there's a forest and there's a national park, and
Okay.
it's the only city I think apart from maybe if I'm not wrong, Nairobi or some another city in Kenya, which has a national park within the confines of the city. And
Oh,
there's problems about encroachment into the
yeah.
national park, and then leopards coming out and like
Oh, wow.
endangering lives of people, children, dogs, and all. There's like videos of like leopards coming and taking like stray dogs, and like it's like blink and you miss it kind of like
Wow. Wow.
it,
Wow.
so so there's also this like forest, and in the
Yeah.
forest there is the tribal people of that area who sort of predate the British, predate a lot of the people, they
Oh,
still
wow.
live there, and
Yeah.
they're in this like sort of semi-urbanized but still forest
Yeah.
kind of dwelling lifestyle, right? um and then the people of Mumbai is, again, it used to be a huge um it used to be a city of mill workers,
Okay.
and like a lot of textile mills and food grain mills and things like that. Um, and so it's sort of always been a big sort of working man's hub,
Mm-hmm.
along with and so that then translated into it becoming the financial hub of the country, like the
Okay.
financial capital, so to speak, of the country. And so then all the big companies have their offices either here or Delhi or both,
Yeah.
and so on. And so over the 80s and 90s and the 2000s, you saw like a lot more people come in to Mumbai for not just for labor jobs and things like that, but for corporate jobs and for education and things like that, right? So um, growing up in Mumbai has always been, I mean, it's been great because, uh, I mean, it's much safer than New Delhi. Like New Delhi has sort of a reputation of uh, like street crime and things like that.
Yeah.
So that's not never been like a problem growing up in Mumbai. Like it's been fairly safe. It's actually given me uh, a good walking habit. Like I like to walk. Like and that's
Oh,
why
sure.
I like Mumbai is because I like walking around that city. And when I went back this summer, one of the things I did was walk everywhere. Like my own friends who still live there, they're like I'm gonna take a rickshaw. I'm like no, I'm
Yeah.
gonna walk,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Or like they're like I'm gonna take an Uber. I'm like why? I'll take a I'll walk to the station. I'll take a train, and then from there I'll walk.
Yeah.
Like it'll save
Yeah.
me money and
And it's,
like
yeah.
no, they're like no, I'll take an Uber, and I'm like all right, not but I like that. Uh,
The
I
feeling
like
of walking
walking.
through the city. I mean, like you said, it's your home. I mean, that feels,
Yeah, exactly.
feels
And
right.
it's
Yeah.
so many sites that you get to see. It's sort of this like macrocosm of, you know, there's a guy selling tea, then there's a guy selling cigarettes like they're right next to him, and they kind of share the shop, and then like there's a
Yeah.
little like you, I mean you kind of know what I mean, like even in like in like the streets of Thailand, like when
Absolutely.
there's like there's markets on the side, but then also there's like massive high rises. Like you
Yeah.
walk a little bit, and so th- that kind of mixed kind of environment is something I really miss here, because like that happened when I came back from the summer from my vacation. When I came back here, the first couple of days were just like I could. It felt like coming out of a concert, and like just my ears ringing. I'm like no, like that noise
Yeah.
is gone, right? But like it was sort of unsettling, right?
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, but like the other thing about Mumbai is it has great public transport in the sense that it's very well connected,
Hmm.
but it also has really bad traffic.
Okay.
And so the buses, like if you like
Even
if
for the
you're a little
buses, like
bit
the bus
patient.
lanes are even
No,
traffic.
there's no such thing as bus lanes.
Oh, wow.
That's what I'm
Okay.
saying, because it's not a planned city.
Okay.
So they don't
Okay.
have
Oh, wow.
there's no bus lanes.
The buses
Any
are in
lane that it
traffic. Yeah.
yeah. So the Mumbai traffic rules, like even within Indian traffic rules, Mumbai traffic rules are something else. It's
Oh,
like if
wow.
you see a space, you take it. That's generally like, and that's understood.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Like that
Yeah.
is
That's,
like if you're like, oh, like if you're driving in America and you're like, oh yeah, that there's a little space in front of me, but it's not like whatever
yeah.
half car length or
Yeah.
one car whatever, and you're just like waiting there being like, I'm a law-abiding citizen. Everyone's gonna be honking at you because you're the idiot, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
they're just move,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Any available space must be taken. It's like
Yeah.
uh Pauli's exclusion principle from physics. Like all these electrons, like there's a space, take it, right?
Yeah.
So there's a space,
Yeah.
take it, right? So
Yeah.
everyone's, and I'm like, that's why I can't really like drive in India or anywhere else. Like I can't, like it's too stressful. So
Yeah.
I prefer to take. I'm like, I'll leave the stress of the driving to someone else. The I'll take the bus, and so uh, I take the bus everywhere. I take the train, um,
Yeah.
and only when it's like raining a lot, or if I have baggage, will I take like a cab or an Uber. But uh, that's one of the things that I really love about Mumbai. It's very like, if you, as someone who grew up there, and I'm very happy that my parents always insisted that, like, and I realize that now, like it's one of the things, like when I was growing up, like my parents would be like, no, I'm not giving you money for a cab,
Okay. Yeah.
because my all my friends, like when we go out, my friends would be like, okay, we're gonna take a cab back home or whatever, right? Like no,
Yeah.
I have to take the bus. So my, at that time I didn't kind of realize it, but like now I kind of do, um because it was like at one point I had to like talk to myself and be like, hey, you're not planning to drive anytime soon.
Yeah.
You can't spend money on cabs all the time. So
Yeah.
uh you know so I just got comfortable with like taking the bus, and like
So,
I liked it now.
so I remember you, yeah, when we talked before, you mentioned about, yeah, I was kind of surprised to hear it, but well, I think you were working on your, you were working on your master's when you had the opportunity. Well, I'd call it an opportunity, but you also maybe said it was the most difficult time in your life. You were working on a thesis or something, and you had to go more to a rural area and do some research of some sort, or surveying, and what, tell me more about that experience.
Yeah, so that was during my master's degree that we had to do some field work because it was required for it was one of the requirements for the master's program. And at first I was definitely not looking forward to it, because like I went into a master's in climate change program kind of knowing that I wanted to already do a thesis in the philosophy of climate science. And so I was like, I don't, in my head, I was like, I don't really care about all this other stuff.
Yeah.
Like, I don't really care about how to do quantitative research or qualitative research. And I don't really, I want to be a philosopher. Like, I'm only here because there's no good philosophy courses.
So again, yeah. So I'll your bachelor's was in
Science, technology, and society.
okay, and then you were looking for, and that was that in Canada, or?
Yeah, that was in Canada.
So you're in Canada, then you came back, you did your master's in philosophy of climate change in Mumbai.
Well, so I did my master's in climate change and sustainability studies. It was like a broad, like it covered everything from like economics of climate change to philosophy to social science and like different like hydrology and like what is that called, like GIS, like geographic information systems, and like all like climate modeling, and like a lot of stuff. But then when we had to write our thesis, we were asked like, what do you want to specialize in? And but I since I talked to the faculty members beforehand, I already kind of knew that this is what I wanted to specialize in. This is what I want coming out of it.
Okay, so your master's degree actually isn't philosophy.
No, it's not. No,
it's science. I mean, like,
it's a climate change. Yeah, it's like
you
an
were able to take philosophy
degree.
classes. You were able to do research of philosophy, and then you were able to. Did that make a difference getting into? So now, yeah, I haven't even mentioned you're in Tampa now. Tampa Bay University, is that the name of it?
University of South Florida.
University of South Florida, and so you were able to get into a PhD program. Tell me, see, because I that was one thing I wanted to do when even when I had my master's in education, I was like, oh, I still want to get that doctorate. And I was looking at different doctorate programs. For me, it seemed difficult to. I felt like I needed to already come up with my like dissertation topic, and I would have wanted more time. And then I saw this psychology program, which really allowed me to take all these breadth of courses and that kind of, and then I saw all these interesting classes. So that's kind of why I left. Tell me a little bit about the finding that program.
I think I lost you there for a second.
Oh, okay.
I can't hear you.
Okay, let me see. And you're frozen too. I wonder if let me check my. Okay. Wait. Hey.
Yeah, I got you back.
You got me. Okay, good. Yeah. In short, my question is, because I want to get in deep to the some deep philosophical questions, but let's get you to where you're at right now. You're in University of Southern Florida. No,
South Florida.
South Florida, and your program is. Yeah, what separate? It's just.
Oh, it's just a PhD. This is just a PhD in philosophy.
And what stage are you at right now? How many?
So right now I'm well, hopefully I'll be giving my comprehensive exams at the end of January, or beginning of January, like at the end of this fall.
So have you
should be working on my
dissertation, either officially or unofficially, just in your mind?
Officially, no. Unofficially, I have some options, but basically I need to narrow something down to sort of, everything is like a big project, and it's like, I need something more realistic. So I'm kind of in the process of whittling that down. But my advisor is currently away for the summer, so that's fine. We'll work on that when they're back. And so
okay. And you're as a PhD student, you also teach some
I do teach
classes, so some what level? Intro to philosophy or
intro.
okay.
So yeah, usually intro. So there's so currently right now I'm doing a summer teaching. I'm teaching in the summer at USF. I'm teaching intro to philosophy. That's what I taught in the semester, the previous semester as well. Before that, I taught. I TA'd for a professor who was teaching intro to philosophy. So before that, I taught a course called Science in a Cultural Context, which is it's like a elective course here for a lot of science and engineering STEM students, which is mostly like the history and philosophy of science kind of stuff. So that
Okay.
was fun. And I also TA'd a environmental ethics course because of my experience with climate change. And so hopefully maybe next, so in the fall, I'm going to be teaching introduction to ethics. And then hopefully that means in the spring, I can teach environmental ethics on my
Okay.
own.
So is that you? I mean, where I know we last time we talked a lot about non-duality, which I want to get into, but also you've got, I mean, that's maybe less practical in some sense, more passionate, I think maybe about that, but these environmental courses are probably I mean, yeah, what are your kind of specialties, would you say? I mean,
Yeah,
environment,
so
explain like what, yeah, I mean, I'm interested in what does that mean? Like, what do you do in your philosophy of climate and environment, and are these moral questions that we are faced with, or?
right, okay, so there's a couple of things, right? One is like in the philosophy of climate change. One would be more like the environmental philosophy aspect. The other would be the philosophy of climate science. Philosophy of climate science would be like, what are the issues in climate science? What are the main questions that they're asking? What are the main ways that they're trying to answer it? What are the issues in that? The fact that we're using computer simulations, what are some problems with computer simulations in terms of ontology, epistemology, and can we trust those, the answers that we get from computer simulations and how we qualify those and so on and so forth.
Sure, yeah.
On the environmental philosophy side, we have one is sort of the philosophy of biology side, which deals with things like, uh, the philosophy of, the species concept and biodiversity and evolution, things like that. And then there's the ethical moral aspect as well, which, like you said, which deals with like, is it bad? Like, basic questions like why it is bad to harm the environment, what is the environment, what is nature, things of that sort. And who is to blame and who is to pay? Like, does the polluter pay? So like, for example, one interesting question is about equity, right? So carbon dioxide has a atmospheric lifetime of about 100, I think is about 150 to 200 years, right? That's how long. It's a very stable, non-reactive gas. That's how long it just kind of sits in the atmosphere. I might be wrong on the number, but basically it stays way longer in the air.
Lifetime, yeah.
Yeah, than say like methane does, which I think is like 21 or 12 or 21 years. Like, it's way less, right?
Yeah.
It's still double digits. Now, carbon dioxide that means that carbon dioxide that was given off by the industrialized nations in the wake of the Industrial Revolution
Is here.
is just about leaving the atmosphere, or like, it's basically been sitting there for a couple of centuries, accumulating, right? That's one of the things that people don't realize about climate change, is that it's an accumulation thing. The carbon doesn't go anywhere. It just goes there and sits, and it just keeps on warming up. So now the question is, when we're talking about making amends or reducing our climate emissions or making climate budgets. The developed nations are saying that, hey, look, we're reducing our climate emissions, but China and India are increasing theirs. Why don't they get stopped? Well, because America, most of Europe, Australia, even like Canada, these countries have continued to pump out CO2 since the 1850s.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Only now has it been reduced. Um, plus, whatever whatever emissions India made before 1947
Minuscule.
were made for and under the British,
Oh, that. Yeah.
right? So
Right.
like so I mean, so that shouldn't account for India's like
Larger.
as a colony, right? It shouldn't account for India's emissions, right? Then in the 20th century, a lot of the emissions that China made was because of the manufacturing that the US moved to China, which the US paid for, right?
Yeah.
So people are like, well, then what? China only made those emissions because of the US's demand for it, and the US paid for it. So why should the penalty for those emissions go to China? And if we're talking about that, then we should also talk about the fact that developed countries have this sort of unaccounted past of emissions,
Yeah.
which some people argue that, oh yeah, but without those emissions, we'd be nowhere, right? We wouldn't have all this, even the developing countries would have no development. And it's like, but that's a different argument.
Yeah. Yeah. So those are what are the, I guess some of those are interesting questions well, generally I'd say universities have more like left leaning views, but then I think of Florida as being more right leaning views. What's
yeah,
like like, okay, basically I know you recently had or maybe kind of recently, maybe you found your soulmate.
no,
I
honestly, I don't know how much I can like say on that, because officially I am officially like an employee of
sure. Yeah.
of the university, which is like a public like a
Absolutely.
government of Florida entity, right?
Sure.
But it is the I can say this much is that it the political sort of situation in Florida with the sort of anti-trans don't say gay laws, or uh, the sort of fight to end wokeism and sort of even trying to sort of end affirmative action, like with what like happened with the Supreme Court in the last couple of days. It is affecting people. Like it is affecting people. There are academics who are not wanting to come to Florida for like even say tenure track positions.
Okay. Oh, faculty.
Because
Okay.
yeah, because they don't feel safe living here.
What about you? As like, I mean, you're a foreign exchange student
I'm technically an international student. So I'm a non-resident alien.
no, okay. Is that okay? And then I mean, America is, you don't necessarily know where somebody's from anyway, but do you feel like that's ever, I mean, like I said, it's different within a university. Like if you tell somebody what you're studying, what kind of are they more interested than what they're doing type of thing? I mean, it's like, oh wow, that's really interesting. Or are they kind of, I mean, I always got that look in philosophy and stuff, like, what are you going to do with that? That was always the question I got. Are they more interested in like, wow, that's actually really interesting?
I don't get that as much now. I used to get it much like earlier on the undergrad and the thing where it's like, well,
yeah,
but now it's like it's a PhD, and it's like at this point, it's like, what are you gonna do with philosophy? Well, I'm gonna become a teacher. Like
And it makes
I know that.
yeah.
Like I know, like I know that. Like I don't know where, but like I'm gonna teach philosophy. Like that's for sure. Because like there's like with a BA in philosophy, like you know this, with a BA in philosophy, you can still go like a whole, but with an MA, it's a little bit more restricted, but you can still go. But with a PhD, there's pretty much
Yeah.
one or two ways that you can go, like all in research or like teaching or
Yeah. Yeah. And you're more
whatever.
interested in teaching.
I'm more interested in teaching. Like
Yeah.
I I'm not a fan of research. Like I love reading. I love
Yeah.
reading. I love making annotations and like finding out stuff and making notes and all of that. I'm not the best writer.
Mm-hmm.
That like and it's something I'm working on. I have very good um, support from faculty here on learning how to write. Um, I'm just like in the last maybe year or so finding uh I don't really have the conviction to like argue or like the energy to argue.
Okay. Yeah.
Like I'm like, yeah, I get excited about something philosophically, and then I'm just kind of happy knowing it to myself. I don't feel the need to prove it to someone else.
Sure. Yeah. That's
And then maybe it's happened more since I've gotten into like Buddhism and stuff, where I see it more like pointless, and I see it more I see more utility in learning learning how to teach better and then teaching younger people
yeah.
the basic stuff, right?
Okay.
And so strengthening my fundamentals, but not really get into the I gotta publish and gotta
Yeah.
get into the
Absolutely.
publish or perish kind of thing.
Absolutely. So
So
I think that, yeah, that puts us actually in a perfect position. I think this is where it's gonna get good, because you like teaching. And I mean, of course, I have a background in philosophy and I'm living in Thailand. Buddhism has always been significant to me, but there were some interesting things you said last time that I if you don't naturally get there, I'll ask you specifically, but some of the same stuff you really said. But let's go back, because we didn't actually talk about you're from a Brahmin family, you said, and
yes.
that's I mean, in terms of religiously, it's minority to Hinduism for sure. And then you mentioned there's like Hindu Muslim conflicts in Mumbai. Where does Brahmin, how does it relate? What are the differences? I'm not that knowledgeable about it, but I
Okay, so
think it's more Hindu. I kind of always thought of it as the same as Hinduism, but it's obviously not. To
no,
explain like how it's
so
different from Hinduism.
here's what happens, right? So uh to go back a long time, you have like the Proto-Indo-European people who then break up into like the Proto-Indo Iranian and the Proto-Indo-Germanic. The Proto-Germanic go west. The Proto-Indo-Iranian settle in like the
Mid or
yeah, in the Middle East, and one part of them goes on to the what we know as the Proto-Indo-Aryan. They go on to what is now like the Indian Peninsula, uh, and they bring with them their culture, which is what we now call Vedic culture, because they had the Vedas, right? Um,
But what are the
they
Vedas for just
the Vedas are four um, central scriptures of largely of Hindu uh, religion. Um, they were made. They were when they were composed. The first one, the Rigveda, the oldest one, like oldest by a lot, was never composed. They were never written down. When they were composed, they were orally, um, passed down through oral tradition. And so there are these long scriptural, form of poetry, um, which has a lot of rituals and all of that stuff. And so these were written. The four Vedas were written down much, much, much later.
Okay, yeah.
And so originally when the Aryans brought the Vedic culture down to, and the Vedic culture by that basically was, you can sort of encapsulate it with like the fire worship, the worship of the horse. It was kind of
Okay.
similar to the Iranians, but kind of shared similar things, but some things were flipped around and so on.
Sure.
Then in the Vedic in Vedic culture was the caste system, which was the priests at the top, the Brahmins, the uh, warriors or the Kshatriyas, the traders, the Vaishyas, and the servants or the Shudras, right? Now, originally, this system, right, and these people, they spoke uh, like early Sanskrit. Um, this system was called the Varna system, and Varna means color. Um, and so that it was less of a caste system in the beginning and more of a um, system of, get out of here.
Hey, that's right.
Sorry, I think she turned off my camera.
That's right. Nothing wrong with
Perfect.
cat.
There
Yeah.
you go. I want to be very careful here because when people say this, it gets sometimes interpreted as defending or justifying or apologizing for the caste system. No,
Yeah.
um,
No, no,
n- uh, there's
put it in
a there.
context.
It was a different. There was still oppression.
Hmm.
Uh, it, but it wasn't necessarily as stringent, which it became under Brahmanism, which is what I'm trying to say. Like
Okay, okay.
um,
So
so the
Brahmanism is more stringent, you're saying?
yeah, so the Vedic system had, so the Vedic culture had four varnas or four colors or
But
the
this time
four
there is no
castes.
separation from Brahmanism and Hinduism. You're the
No,
same.
no. So Brahmins were a category, the top category,
Okay,
right?
okay,
And then and then basically the the it depends on the time in history and like who you ask. The Kshatriyas, the warriors, and the Brahmins, the priests, always sort of fought for
oh, okay,
supremacy,
yeah,
right? And so uh uh in some depictions the the warriors, the kings, are shown to be like the the highest caste in men, while the priests are there to translate God's opinion and
yeah,
support them. But in other things, the Brahmins are said to be at the top and the purest and the closest to. So
okay,
depends on like the historiography of the thing. But
okay,
either way, what is generally understood is that Brahmanism is when Brahminical supremacy, when they solidified their hold over the caste system,
okay,
right? Um, and this happened for a long time when, after a lot of wars between the different, uh, because the Aryans were all these just like tribes and tribes of bands of warriors, so they would lose a lot of warriors, right? And so the Brahmins, the priests who were the gatekeepers of the faith, had to deputize local uh, warriors and local warlords who are otherwise outside of. They weren't Aryan. They didn't come from there. They were
yeah,
indigenous to this, and bring them into the fold, and so on and so. And
okay,
so they were kind of then supplicant to the Brahmins, and that led to Brahmin supremacy, sort of in, in the midst of which the Siddhartha Gautama was born, and then
okay,
sort of
okay, okay.
became
So
the
that,
Buddha, and so,
okay, so
right.
that okay, now, and so, um, yeah, I know you're interested in Buddhism now, but there was did you feel coming from like a uh background, Brahmin, raised that way, that naturally, like in our early, was there like a revolt against that and you turned an interest into Western psychology kind of? I mean, I know there's of course a lot of parallels with non-dualism, like in Heidegger, which we talked about before, which I definitely want to get into. But so I guess yeah, tell me, it seems like there was in a way you're coming back to maybe some things. Tell me about that, maybe.
Okay, so here's the thing, right? So um the school that I went to, the high school that I went to, was its name is Arya Vidya Mandir. It means Temple of Aryan Knowledge. Again, not Aryan in any sense of the form that Westerners think. This is Arya. Arya itself, the word means noble. That was the word. That was the name that the Vedic people used to refer to them, to their highest. Their. It's like when the Socrates, when in like the Socratic dialogue, Socrates asks like, "Are you Greek?" And to be Greek means like to hold like property, or like to be like, right? So Arya was their word of saying like noble, right? The women would address their husband as Arya, which would mean like kind of like sir, right? So Arya just means noble. The West has a whole different history with it, but the school was it was a Hindu school. It wasn't a. I like to make this clarification. It wasn't a Hindu revisionist school. It was a Hindu revivalist school. It was trying to revive customs, but while also giving us, like, telling us that rational inquiry is important. Like there was they made us do like a lot of prayers, and like we had like the little like fire sacrifice like thing where we put like ghee and like little like it was kind of like being in like a Catholic school. Like they sort of forced us through the ritualistic motions, but I remember there's always still being a focus on, no, you still gotta you still gotta work, you still gotta study, you still gotta ask questions, you still gotta read, you still gotta, like, there's always a focus. It was never just like it wasn't like a religious education. Like that's what I'm saying. Like we got a rational, scientific minded education along with all of these but that still kind of like pushed me away from the whole thing. Like I was like, I don't want to be. I'm like, look, no, I was there's still aspects of Hinduism that I'm fascinated by, which is like the history, the mythology, the etymology of like a lot of the words, and like Sanskrit, right? Like the philosophy, the non-dualism, all of that. But the sort of forced ritualism of it pushed me away, and I started getting attracted by the sciences, specifically physics and biology, because of, well, like I started reading like your Stephen Hawking and like that kind of stuff. I started reading biology and about genetics and like that kind of stuff. It got me within a few years I was reading like Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins. And I become self-professed atheist out there, always ready to sort of mouth off to anyone, sort of very reactive, to the point where like I was rejecting like religion as a whole. Like that stance of mine has softened much more in the past like 5 or 6 years. But
how did
that
what,
sorry, go on.
Oh no, yeah, I was gonna say what kind of brought you back to a, I mean it's still not, I mean, I guess well, yeah, let's get to kind of the what non-dualism is. But before we get to the Buddhism, a little bit of what I know Heidegger
what brought me back, right?
Yeah. I mean, I'm more familiar, like, I mean, kind of like Kant and Berkeley, idealism.
Right.
Exactly. What is non-dualism? Because I mean, non-dualism by definition could technically be materialism, right? I mean, it's not dualism, but it's definitely not that. Is non-dualism synonymous with idealism? I don't think so either, but closer to it maybe. But I mean, like Art Berkeley, and do you consider Berkeley and like Kant or non-dualist or yeah, what is not, yeah, define non-dualism. I mean, for me, also anybody listening to this, of course, I'm going to be a little more familiar with the philosophers, but actually talk to, like, as if I'm introductory philosophy student, kind of teach me what non-dualism is on a, like,
okay, so non-dualism, right, is, I think, best understood as the relationship between similarity and difference.
That's heavy. Hold on. Okay, the relationship between
similarity and difference, in the sense that you can only differentiate between things which have a similarity on which they differ. Right? So when you say two sides of the same coin, one side is heads, the other side is tails. So they're different sides, but they're of the same coin.
Okay.
Right? So they're just as much as they're different, they are the same. And because if you have two coins and you have heads on one side and heads on the other,
but they're different coins, then yeah,
they're different coins.
Like,
or you have heads on one and tails on the other. Yeah, exactly. Right.
It's like, yeah, we're on the same page, and then yeah, but different books or something.
They're different books. Exactly. Right.
Okay.
Like the fact that you're on the same page means that you have some common basis from which, yes, you might be able to go to different logical conclusions, even contradictory conclusions.
Yeah.
Especially contradictory conclusions, and those will be, and it'll be fine, right? So one sort of way of, and it's not entirely, non-dualism is not easy to understand, because it does require a sort of shift in learning, because we do grow up in a dualist kind of world.
Yeah.
Right? We grow up. So basically, one of the most important influences on Plato is of Parmenides. And Parmenides, who says that only beings can be, non-being can't be, right? So the nothing can't exist. That is a dualism, right? But for the West, right, for the East, non-being can be,
or non-being is, or I mean,
non-being is, yeah,
yeah,
right. And that's what Heidegger also later realizes, that the being of all beings is actually nothing.
Yeah, okay. And so
non-dualism would be, dualism would be to draw a line, right, and say that being, on all the things that are, those are beings, right, and only nothing is not.
Okay.
Right. But no, kind of, it's arguable that the nothing actually is.
Yeah.
It's not actually is not, right?
Yeah.
And so Heidegger's example of that is, when it's very simple. You have the example of the sea and the sky and the horizon in the middle. And he's like, what is the horizon? It's nothing. It's not a thing. It's not a definite solid line. It's the gap. It's the place where the boundary of the sea and the boundary of the sky meet. And that boundary tells you where to draw the line between where one thing ends and the other thing begins. But that which tells you where one thing ends and another thing begins is not itself another thing. It can't be, because then you'd have two lines, one between the first thing and this line, and then one between there, and then you'd keep going. Exactly. Then you'd keep going and you'd keep going, right? And so that which is the definition between objects, is the definition of objects, cannot itself be an object. That which is the definition, right?
Yeah.
But then what is it? It's nothing. But still there, right? And so that is sort of like an ontological non-dualism, where the entities exist, and that the nothing also exists. Because if the nothing didn't exist, and if we couldn't recognize the nothing, then we couldn't recognize that right? So one way of reading Heidegger is that we usually think our power as human beings is to individuate individual beings. I mean, like, this is a glass, this is a cup, this is not a cup, this is this is this species. And he's like, but it's the not that is different, because without the not, you wouldn't be able to tell one being from the other. You wouldn't be able to tell what is work and what is play, what is work and what is not work, right? So like and so like that is something that really I like to think about. I even bring this up in class sometimes, right? Like, you have the sea and the sky, and then you have the horizon. The horizon is not a thing, but it is because it is not a thing that you can tell what the other two things are, right? Then for Pyrrho, Pyrrho of Elise of ancient Greece, the ancient skeptic, right? That was
that was
like an epistemologic.
The book was that Beckwith book.
Yeah, the Greek Buddha book.
Pyrrho is the guy who was brought Alexander the Great.
Yeah, he came with Alexander the Great to the Indian border.
And may have that book that you're talking about. He may have taken some.
He may have
ideologies, and this is pre-Christ times.
Yes. Yeah.
Could have influenced some.
Yeah, because I mean, if according to what Beckwith says, like if that's true, it's amazing, because like it's like the etymology of it's systemically very similar, right? Because his claim is that there is no systemic predecessor to Pyrrho's skepticism in Greek philosophy. There's no realistic way that it could have come from Greek philosophy. But on the other hand, you have something that is almost word for word the same in India. So where could that have come from?
The time, let's get, so Pyrrho is Pyrrho is Greek.
He's Greek. He's around the same time as Aristotle.
Okay. And possibly influence Aristotle, or a different branch of like.
No, different. Okay. So, Aristotle's famous work, one of the famous works, is the Categories, right? And Aristotle was sort of, his main project was trying to figure out how you can explain the being of things, of different categories and of being, and all that. Plato's one of Aristotle's main accomplishments, like the laws of logic, right? The laws of the first one being the law of identity, the second one being the law of non-contradiction, and the third one being the law of excluded middle. In a way, non-dualism has a problem with these laws, right? Because the law of non-contradiction says that A can't be not A.
I have to let my cat in. She's here. She always
Oh,
does.
no worries.
Here she is. Come in. Come in. Yeah, you understand that we.
Mine's just sleeping over here.
All right. Yeah, we have to. And I'm gonna give her a little snack because she's out of snack. So, I mean, I have to admit, I did a little. I mean, yeah, I'm not. I didn't know really. Yeah, I mean, I didn't know this. It's and I want to look more. I haven't read that book yet, but where did Piro's if we are saying this was introduced into where did it go? Where did it go next? Like if it's not going into mainstream Greek, somehow it got subsumed by
no, so no, it's fascinating. I'll tell you what happens. It's a fascinating story. So Piro comes back from his journey voyage with Alexander, comes back to his hometown, and then he starts preaching this this new philosophy of detachment from your passions, and how to find this state of of ataraxia, of undisturbedness and all that. And the story goes that the people of his town were so impressed that they made him the high priest, and they made philosophers tax exempt in the town, right? And I'm like, that's something that philosophers now are just like dreaming about, like. But anyways, he amassed a couple of students at the time, and the story goes that Piro lived very plainly, very simply, like almost like a monk, and he lived with his sister. And he says that there were times when Piro himself couldn't help but still be drawn in by humans. So like someone misbehaved with his sister, and he couldn't help but feel angry and feel for her, and then he reacted out. He lashed out, right? But then he realizes it, and then he sort of goes back into meditating on that, and right. So here's the thing about Pyrrhonism or Pyrrhonian skepticism, is that it basically it's the basis of epistemological skepticism, because it asks this question, which it calls the problem of the criterion, where it says whenever you're deciding something, you have a criterion, right? What makes that criterion suitable? Well, you have another criterion. What makes that criterion suitable? Well, then you have another criterion, and you go into that infinite regress, right? So one thing is to realize that then all of these criterions are useless. And this is also like the first version of what we finally get as Hume's problem of induction, like in the
so I'm trying to make that I mean, do that this could have a direct link to Heidegger, and Heidegger could be influenced by these philosophers.
As far as I know, as far as I know, he that's what I'm trying to sort of read through. As far as I know, he's not had any direct influence by these people. Because so what I was saying is, Piro's basic Pyrrhonian skepticism is a skepticism which is not immune to its own skepticism. Right? So the ultimate Pyrrhonist will be critical of the Pyrrhonian paradigm, which is to be skeptical, right? So it's not immune to its own skepticism. So it's skeptical of itself, right? Which is why Hume in the Inquiry calls it like a epistemological, like he calls it a way to nihilism, because it'll keep. But that's also a part of the non-dualism, is that, but what you are getting by rejecting or by being skeptical of your own self is more important. And so what happens is Piro preaches this sort of detachment and skepticism. His students take it forward. One of his most famous students, from where we get a lot of this information, is called Timon. And then I forget the last guy, his name. I forget his name, but he basically became the scholar of the Platonic Academy at that time. And as a Pyrrhonian skeptic who came to a position of power, he turned the Platonic Academy skeptical.
Oh, okay.
Right? He made skepticism the official philosophy of the Platonic Academy, right? So this is not no small feat or some small story.
Yeah.
But unlike, and this is, I don't know what to call it, but he dogmatized it, because he said, unlike Pyrrhonian skepticism, where you could be skeptical of the very first thing, which is like, why should I be skeptical of in the first place?
Yeah.
He said, no, you can't be skeptical of that.
Can't double stamp a triple stamp.
Yeah. So he says, so you can't be skeptical of, why should I be skeptical? No, you just have to be skeptical, right? So it gave form, it gave birth to what is called academic skepticism, because it was from the sort of a top-down skepticism and from the academy. But it's also, ironically but aptly, called dogmatic skepticism, right? It's this weird antithesis, that oxymoron that exists, where you can be skeptical of everything else except for the fact about why should I be skeptical? No, you can't be skeptical about that, right? So that happened, and then that passed on as skepticism for centuries. I think until Sextus Empiricus wrote the book on Pyrrhonism. But then again, if you read Beckwith, there's differences between original Pyrrhonism, what Pyrrhonism became later, and what the world assumed as Pyrrhonism, because Pyrrho existed in a largely open world. You had Plato had just passed, and you were living in the world of Aristotle. It wasn't as strictly a dualist world as Hume lived in, right? So when not viewed from a dualist perspective, from either one of the sides of either, say, idealism, materialism, or rationalism, empiricism, if you're not viewing it from a side, then it is kind of difficult to distinguish non-dualism from a kind of stoicism.
Yeah.
But if you view it from one of the sides, it looks like nihilism.
Okay.
Right? Because each of the sides wants you to pick one of the sides. That's what a dualism is, right? It's empiricism is telling you, no, experience is the better arbiter, and rationalism telling you no, reason is the better arbiter, right? So I'll give you an example. One of my students in my last year's my freshman intro class, he was asking, why is Hume called an empiricist? He's a skeptic, right? And I'm like, yeah, he's called an empiricist because the freaking European philosophy at the time, even now, can't abide by something being neither.
Yeah.
It has to be one or the other. So if I'm like, look, if Hume is using the problem of induction to show that induction cannot be rationally justified, then the empiricists are like, booyah, screw you, rationalism. Right? But people don't see that what Hume is also saying is that the cornerstone of the problem of induction, causality, cannot be supplied through reason or through experience. We cannot explain causality through experience.
Yeah.
So He's saying neither of the two
Yeah.
gives us what it is, right? Ne- sim- we just have causality as part of our psychology. We have as part of custom. We are inductive. That's how it is. You can't explain it empirically, and you can't explain it rationally. But for some reason, he's taken to be an empiricist, and if he's not an empiricist, he's a skeptic, because he's a skeptic because his solution to the problem of induction doesn't fall on either of the sides.
Yeah. Yeah.
His solution is something else. It's like, oh yeah, it's our psychology. That
Mhm.
it's a non-dualist. It's a non-dualist
Okay.
solution. But to the rest of the dualist world, it is like, oh, he doesn't believe in this. He doesn't believe in this either. So either he doesn't believe in any of our things, in which case he's a skeptic, or he believes that induction is grounded by nothing rational, which means it's irrational, which means he's either a skeptic or a nihilist,
Okay.
an
Okay.
epistemological nihilist,
Okay.
right? So like, I don't think a lot of people are reading Hume right, because like a lot of
No,
people read him as like as an empiricist, or as like a like. So I think skepticism is only a problem if you're already dug into one of the sides,
yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And
right? Because so sorry, I just want to say, what is the difference? So you have side A and side B, and you have a fence between them, right? Aism is to argue that A is right.
yeah.
Bism is to argue that B is right. Relativism is to sit on the fence and be like, well, I don't know, either of you could be right, right? Non-dualism is to say that, well, hang on, either of you could be wrong. Both of you could be wrong,
Yeah.
right? Plus, I don't like that fence. Cause like the fence is the problem, right? We're I'm not gonna sit on that. I'm not gonna sit on that fence. What if we remove the fence and see like what you're arguing over,
Yeah.
right? Like if you're arguing A is right about what, and you're arguing B is right about what,
Hmm.
what Aism and Bism conceal is that the what. And so we're so engrossed in arguing our side of things that we form while we're arguing, the fence is formed. But just like the sea
The
and the
horizon. Yeah.
sky,
That's not.
yeah, exactly, the fence is it's the fence isn't a
Yeah.
thing. It's formed by
The
us arguing,
yeah, that we haven't even established as
right?
as
Right. And the
existing.
and the relativist is just a dude surfing the confluence of both these like tidal waves that are being formed.
So
The
so
non-dualist is standing there.
and then but then they'd team up together and call you a nihilist. Or
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, yeah. Right. Yeah.
and so yeah, ultimately I want to get more into Buddhism. There was something interesting that I didn't realize, and I guess so that yeah, a problem with Buddhism is, for some people, I think, is that it sounds nihilistic because you eventually, or you're saying the self doesn't exist. But you mentioned something that I wasn't really aware of. So if we could backtrack to
Mhm.
the Orthodox Hindu, and then I scribbled it down, Charvada Ajivika. There was like a no soul
Mhm.
group. So I think understanding. So again, I definitely want you to speak at your lowest level of
Yep.
communicating this Buddhism in the context of where Buddha was at that time. What are the
Okay.
differences between those two ideologies? And they both had karma, I think, right? Or they were both
Right.
karmic. So because that's essential. And then lead that into, of course, the difference between which I told my wife about this, of course, she's Thai and Buddhist, and she was like, yeah, that's spot on your, to me, it was a revelation when you kind of about rebirth and reincarnation. I've always had a difficult time with that concept of not no self, but reincarnation. And so those three things, if you can lead, and we kind of talked about this time.
So let me start at the beginning, right? Let's start with the Buddha, right? So, like I said, the Buddha existed at that time when Brahmanism was taking, like the Brahminical supremacy was taking over the hierarchy and the organization of the Vedic system, right? And then so the stages broadly are Vedic culture, Brahmanism, and then Hinduism, where you get a lot more communities mixing into the Hindu thing, like non-Hindu communities becoming part of the Hindu thing, and also amalgamating as separate from the Buddhists and that. So in the times of Brahminical in the Brahminical era, Buddhism, the way that I understand it, right, is that every now and then in this sort of dualist world where people are arguing either this is true or that is true, every now and then there are people born who realize the value, of non-dualism. You have people like Piro, you have people like Hume, you have people like the Buddha, and they understand some truths about the world, and they find a way to bring those truths to the people. Now, the reason why Buddhism has karma and rebirth and all of that is because the Hindus already had it. The Vedic culture, the Brahminical culture already had it. When the Buddha originally gave his sermon and his teachings, right? His teachings did not have anything to do with originally with rebirth or with a cycle of rebirth and so on. It was simple. It was, there's suffering in the world. The suffering has, it is not eternal. It has a beginning and it has an end. There is a way to end this suffering, right? And then, he didn't really engage in metaphysics. And there's when they say that the famous, like the Buddha had the famous half smile where you can't tell if he's smiling or if he's frowning, that itself is an expression of non-dualism.
Okay.
Because when people would ask him metaphysical questions about what goes beyond this life, his response would be a half smile.
Okay.
Because he's like, there's no point, because he's like, any kind of speculative talk about what happens after this life is just that, speculative talk, right? Now, later, after the Buddha's death, the Buddhists had to compete in the marketplace of religions, and they found that adopting these ideas of karma, which weren't really like religious, they were part of like people believed them in, it was just cultural belief, right? And so they adopted those into, and they were like, it works better for us with our non-self idea than with the self. So now let me give you an idea of what the Hindu belief of rebirth is, right? The idea is that there is in each of us a soul or a self called the Atman. And the universe itself has a soul, cosmic soul, called Brahman. Now, there are what are called Dvaita schools, which are, Dvaita means different or dual, which say that these two are different. The Atman and the Brahman are different. And the Advaita schools, which are non-dualist schools, which say that the Atman and the Brahman are the same. And that focusing on the sameness And that it's actually very interestingly the inverse of Buddhism, where it's like that is infinite, and the Brahman is infinite, and the Atman is the same as the Brahman. It's just separated from it, but it's the same, but it's also infinite. And then because if we focus on that infinity, then you will understand that that the fact that we have all these different beings around us is illusory, and that the reality is that we are not different from the Brahman, but we are same. Now for there are some common sort of tropes, right? The world around us, the phenomenal world, is what both the Hindus call and the Buddhists also call samsara. Samsara literally means like a collection, like a large, like everything basically. Like in Hindi, and modern day, the adaptation of samsara is sansar, which literally just translates to everything, to creation, universe, existence, right? And usually what and this samsara is full of maya, or it's illusory, right? In Sanskrit and Hindi we say mohamaya. Moha means attachment, temptation, and maya is illusion. So the world is illusory. It draws you in with its different all these different things that pull, material pleasures and pains that pull you in. And because we're stuck in the material world, our soul is stuck there. So when we die, our soul is still stuck, and it's still entrenched in it, and so it'll be reborn. The thing is, if you do good things throughout your life, you'll be reborn in a better state in the next life. If you do bad things, you'll be reborn in a lower status in your next life.
So this is Hindu, that right there.
This is Hinduism, yes. Okay. Yeah. And then, but if you focus on the non-duality of Brahman and Atman, and you meditate and you go through those stages of penance and asceticism and all of that, you will realize that the non-dualism and break out. You will attain moksha, which is enlightenment. Okay. And you will escape from the cycle of rebirth and
but this is all taught pre-Buddha.
Yes,
that's Hindu. Okay, yeah. I mean, okay, that's
I
didn't actually. I wasn't aware.
And so that's the thing. So then when the Buddha first saw his whole he had his whole awakening, all of that was because of his own thing. Like he saw the suffering, and he understood the impermanence, and then he meditated on the essence of being, and he found that there was no self, and that's how the rebirth and stuff, connecting the non-self to the Atman, and that was done by later Buddhist scholars. Okay. In order to systematize the Buddhist canon, and also as a way to make it more approachable for other to people, because they were proselytizing and they wanted to get more people on their side. And people are worried about their, like, it's like in Christian America, if Christians are worried about, legitimately worried about what's going to happen in the next life, and you ask them to switch to a religion, they'd rather switch to a religion which has the same underlying system, and you're like, it's kind of like, yeah, your account will transfer over to this bank, you just have a little bit more benefits. Right. Like, right. It's the same. They're like, oh, but like, I don't want to leave my religion. I have all this like goodwill banked up, or like whatever. Like I just did some good thing. They're like, no, you could. Yeah, exactly. You can bring you exactly.
Karma credit, karma transfer.
Right. Exactly. Just like transfer all your credit over here. You're good. Right. Plus,
Okay.
there's no self, so you don't have to worry about like ID verification and all of that. So you could just
Okay.
like, anyway, so that was added in later as like a,
Yeah.
it was very similar to actually like Christian scholasticism, where like
Huh.
they needed, they thought they needed a way to systematize and really uh, uh, refine and give a strong metaphysical backing to what was otherwise just seen as like a forest system. Like people would, like they were just these monks living everywhere and they would go along preaching, but they were like, no, we need political capital, right? They started to influence kings and then local chieftains and stuff like that. They actually got like political power and stuff like that, which is why like in like Thailand and Cambodia and Sri Lanka and all, they have like a lot of, it's not just like a forest religion and stuff.
Yeah.
It's big buildings and big uh,
Yeah.
social
Exactly.
political capital in there. So anyway, so what the Buddhist version of this looks like is that the same thing, right? Instead of samsara being of moh maya, instead of it being of attachment and illusion, samsara is full of dukkha, of suffering,
Hmm.
right? It is full of suffering because it is also illusory and tempting, because even though the things around us are all impermanent, that they will all decay, and because they're impermanent, our valuing of them is faulty, uh, and we put more value in them than we should. We value them as things as themselves instead of, especially when it comes to people, we objectify things, we objectify people, and we treat them as, oh, just as that thing, instead of understanding that things have no inherent nature. When we fall into that illusion, we fall into the dukkha, into the suffering. And knowing this and focusing on it and meditating on it can help you come out of it. But now the difference is that you can do that just in this life,
Hmm.
right? Like the for the Buddhists, this this is exactly the same as what Piro said.
Hmm.
This is what Piro took back. Piro didn't take any of the rebirth stuff
Yeah.
back.
Yeah. Yeah.
Piro was like, no, look, if you if you if you understand why either being right or being wrong about something makes you feel a certain way, then what's important is the underlying feelings, the underlying rootedness, right?
Hmm.
Like why do you feel right and why do you feel wrong? Because if you feel right, then you go back. Why are you right? Then you go back into that. Why are you right? Why are you right? Why are you right? You go back into that criterion problem. So you detach and you reach a state of what Sextus Empiricus calls equipollence, right? Where you're equally polarized or unpolarized from everything. You can't be moved this way or that. And it is it's not because you think this one is right or this one is less right or whatever, you're not taking a decision. It is because, sorry, my cat's eating paper. It is because you're not interested in either side, because you've seen the truth of things, that you don't feel like giving and are right. You're not pulled by either side into committing. And so for the Buddhists, right, that's what the world is. The world, samsara, is all of these things constantly pulling at you. Your personal relationships, your family, your partner, your pets, your the TV shows you like, the movies you like, the things you like to eat and drink, the sports you like, whatever, things you like to browse on the internet. All of these things, they constantly keep pulling you back, right? But to it's like an addiction, right? And the Buddhists, it's like, okay, look, step one is to realize that you're addicted to this thing, to reality, right? And that's good. That's probably more than a lot of other people in the history of the world can do.
Yeah.
Now if you want to take that extra step, you gotta work on getting out of the addiction, right? But you're not gonna get there if you don't realize it first.
Yeah.
Right? So philosophical study of Buddhism, reading the literature, the canon and all of that, can get you that first step, right?
Yeah.
And then you have to meditate. You have to go, probably go to an actual teacher and study it and understand it, meditate it, or have some life experience that changes it, where you can attain that state of equanimity or of equipoise, and that's what Madhyamaka Buddhism says. Madhyamaka Buddhism, which focuses on the idea of shunyata, of nothingness, right? It says that you can't achieve shunyata by trying. Shunyata is what later becomes the idea of Zen in Japanese Buddhism.
Okay.
You can't achieve shunyata by trying, because it's not it's nothingness, right? It's not a thing like any other thing. Things pull you towards them. When you want something, you can aspire and try to achieve it and get it.
It's like, okay, it's like having an attachment to the desire to have
right. To try and achieve nothingness is to fail, because you're trying to, first you're already making it a thing, and then you're trying to achieve it as if it were a thing. It's like you're never going to get there. Right? Nothingness is in fact achieved by understanding that, like really understanding the empty nature of the things and the people and the world around you, and like having like a sort of metaphysical or existential release from living, right? And so if you're a materialist and you believe that this world is all there is, then you're going to see this as, sorry, my cat dropped something. Then you're going to see this as nihilism.
So that was it, Charvada or something,
Theravada Buddhism,
or was that, or what was contemporary to Hinduism during Buddha's time, that also they had the no self aspect of it, but
right. So all schools of Buddhism, right? All schools of Buddhism will have these three, or rather like these three things. First is the three marks of existence, that all of existence is suffering, it is impermanent, and it is without self, or without self nature, or without essence. The second is the Four Noble Truths, which is like that there is suffering, there is a way to end suffering, and then the Eightfold Path, which is the Eightfold Path of the Buddha, right? And so these three things are usually core in every Buddhist school of thought. What changes is the sort of metaphysical like aspects of it, because and this is very typical of Buddhism, is that wherever it has gone, it has taken whatever is local and absorbed it, which is why Indian Buddhism, original Indian Buddhism after the death of the Buddha, that is where the whole rebirth thing comes from.
Because that's where,
right? And then Buddhism goes it goes out to other places. There's something called Pure Land Buddhism, right, where they actually have like a deity, a god that they pray to, right? Then you have Chinese Buddhism, right, the Chan Buddhism, and then you have Zen Buddhism, and they have absorbed the parts of Taoism, parts of Shinto, like, so but the main sort of crux always remains the same, right? So in the case of Indian Buddhism, with the rebirth, what happened is, for the Buddhists, they say, look, when they say there is no self, it's not, again, not a sort of nihilism, because they're not saying that you don't exist or I don't exist, right? They're saying that nothing in the world exists with an essence, right? Which is, if you look at the Western aspect, Western philosophy, the essence is that which makes that thing, that very thing, right? And there's different arguments for what is form the essence and all of that. Like, what is the essence? But here we're talking about self nature. What the Buddhists say, swabhava. Self bhav means feeling or nature. So all things are without swabhava. They're without essence. They're without self nature. And the example that is given is, if you have a chariot, right, and I take the chariot apart and I dismantle all of its pieces and set them apart, right? Where is the chariot, right? And you say,
different
yeah,
places,
I'm like, which part here is the chariot? Right? And say none of these parts is the chariot. Like, okay, where's the chariot? And then you say, okay, no, the chariot is formed when all these parts are put together. So okay, I put them all in a heap, and you're like, that's still not a chariot. Like, okay, then no, if it has to be put together in a specific appropriate way. Okay, so I put it together as in some manual, and you have a chariot. I'm like, okay, but still, like, what is the chariot? Because as far as I see, the chariot came from me. Otherwise, it's just a heap of stuff or parts, right? And so so this is like the non-dualist idea for ship of Theseus, where the ship of Theseus, where okay, you replace one part. Is the ship still there, or is the ship not there? Well, if you're assuming that there is some enduring enduring eternal thing called the ship, either in one of these parts of the ship or outside of one of these parts of the ship, right? So it's got to be one of the two, right? Because if it's in the ship, then you're some sort of a materialist, where like, yeah, the essence is in the, but then if I replace it, is the essence gone? And if you say that no, the essence of the ship is not in the ship itself, not in the parts of the ship, it's outside, but then then it's outside of, it's something idealistic. But then for the non-dualist, it's like, well, here's your fence, the ship. You're arguing that the essence of the ship is in the parts. You're arguing that the essence of the ship is something else. I'm saying there is no ship. There's just the parts.
Or that the ship of Theseus, of course, they end up with two ships, right? And then that kind of,
right.
Because you're saying, you can change one part, it's still the ship, and then at the same time you're building another ship with all those parts that you're
right, with all the other parts.
So that's almost like, that's non-dualism, but it's almost showing the, it's showing the absurdity of I don't know, materialism, or just dualism,
any kind of substance dualism, right? Substance dualism, yeah.
Oh, substance dualism. Yeah. Okay, wow.
But yeah, that's the sort of idea, right? Is that when you apply it to the human body, is okay. We've been, since we're born, we grow up, our cells die and reproduce and die and divide and keep happening. Our hair falls out, comes back, grows back, comes out. Beard, all the body parts are constantly replacing, right? So we are definitely not the same physical specimen that we were yesterday, even a couple of hours ago, even. Like I had a shower 2 hours ago, skin cells were rubbed off what I'm toweling off, right? And we're definitely even like mentally not the same people. I mean, again, to say that we're mental and like to make the divide between mental and physical is already to fall into a dualism, right? Because the, again, mentality of who, physicality of who, we're united by the who, but the Buddhism says there's no who, right? So but mentally, I'm not the same person I was years ago when I was born, and like changed throughout. And so again, the Buddhists say that, look, either one part of us is the self, just like the ship. One part of us contains your essence, or there is some other soul, self, substance in your body which continues to endure, so that when this body dies, it is right? But we can't really find either of these. Right? Every part of your body gets replaced sometime or the other. Even parts of your brain, they do. And we suffer for it. We get loss in neuroplasticity and loss in brain function as we grow older and our brain cells die. Like that happens, right? So it's not like, oh yeah, the brain is essential. No, and we see those differences, right? We don't remain the same, and neither is there. Like, Descartes said that the soul rests in the pineal gland behind the eye. Like, no, there's no such. We don't have any evidence, and it's not recent. People have looked for this for centuries, millennia now, right? So the Buddhist argument is, look, okay, so when they say that there is no self, what they're arguing is there's no enduring, eternal, substantial soul, which exists beyond this body, right? They're not rejecting the existence of what, and this is, I think, a problem of translation, and also like the way that psychology today uses the word self, because psychology uses the word self to mean empirical self, which is always changing, which Buddhism to 100% agrees exists, can't deny that. The empirical self exists, but if you were to say that, whatever you call the soul or the transcendental self, if you want to call it, or something like that, that does not exist, right? Further, now this is where the karma thing comes in.
And
because
reincarnation
because the Buddha was this is where the Buddha, like, as far as we know, he was with you, right? He was like, okay, we don't have any soul or self or something like that. And so if you want to focus on the nature of the self, like, because it's nothing, the shunyata, you can't focus on it. You can't strive for it. You have to meditate and sort of get to it by release. Now, when they wanted to sort of update their underlying philosophical system with the reincarnation, rebirth stuff, the arguments that they gave against the Hindu system were that, look, if each of us has an individual soul, and we're doing good things so that that soul gets placed in a better life next cycle, then it's ultimately like not good. It's literally selfish. Right? But and the point is, they're like, and this is, they're like, this is not even to say that there is such a thing as a soul. You're just doing it because you believe it. right? Like
Yeah.
our system is built on the fact that we have no proof of a soul, right? And then on the other hand come the Charvakas and the Ajivikas, who are the hedonists, and they're like the more
Okay.
the nihilists, right? Who say that if there is no soul, then I'm free to do whatever I want. I have no moral obligations. I have no ethical obligations. I'm free to live a nihilistic or hedonistic life as and when, like, and do whatever I want, right? And the Buddhists believe that just because there is no enduring soul which faces repercussions doesn't mean it's not a it doesn't mean it's an excuse to be an asshole.
Yeah.
Right? So if you're a good person and you want to be good, on the other hand, that's the thing, right? On the flip side, if you're a good person and you want to be good, it shouldn't take
having to
your soul being on
Yeah.
the line for
Yeah.
you to do good.
Yeah.
The point is you can recognize good and you can do it regardless. You're capable of doing it regardless of you having soul, because you were able to do it yesterday until you still thought that the soul existed, or until these philosophers came and told you that the soul didn't exist.
Yeah.
You're still doing good. So you can still do good, right? And so it's again, it's this strange, like it's utilitarian in the sense of, yeah, do good, because the more good you do, the better karma you'll have. And then at the end of your life, if you die with a good karma, then a new life is sparked in a better place. It's not you, because there's no you to track.
Yeah.
Right? It's like it's paying it forward kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah.
That it's like you earn money in this life, and when you die, you give it to someone else.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? And then the question is, well, but then why should I earn money in this life if I'm only going to give it to someone else? Well, because whatever you have in your life, the good and the bad, was deposited by someone else when they died.
Yeah.
That's the flip side of it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So if you really believed in, and at that time it was people believed in this, so they believed, yeah, okay, no, whatever I have, my house, my cow, my bulls, my children, is good fortune or bad fortune, is because of what someone else did in their past life, right? So I have to pass it on. So it's literally like a selfless kind of ethic. But so you could say it's like, it's consequentialist, or it's utilitarian in that sense, is that, okay, you do good things because it adds good karma to your balance. But because there is no self, it's sort of also like deontological, where you're not doing it for, well, you're not doing it for your own benefit. You're not doing it for your own utility. You're doing it for the utility of someone you've never even met. But what the Buddha says, no, you have a duty to do it. You have a duty to do it because someone else did it for you in the past. That's why you're where you are. Right? And it also has this aspect of virtue, of virtue ethics, where it's like, what would the virtuous person do? Well, the virtuous person wouldn't care about their own selfishness.
Yeah.
The virtuous person would do good wherever they could do good, wherever it's possible for them to do good. Right? And so like that's my way of looking at, like, ethically at the non-dualism, where it's got aspects of both, but it's neither.
Yeah.
Right? And so that, if I was again to come back to what you asked at the beginning, what is non-dualism? Is it a monism? Right? Is non-dualism like monism, where it's like, oh yeah, these two things are the same? That's a dualist way of looking at it.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Because the dualist way of looking at it is, are these two things the same? Because that would mean collapsing one onto the other. Either everything is reduced, it's actually reductive. It's either reducing the ideal to the material, or sort of reducing the material to the ideal, and then saying, oh yeah, then everything is this or everything is that. That's a monism. This is not a monism, right? Non-dualism is understanding that the commonality, like I said, between things that are different, or like understanding the similarities between the contraries, right? And so where there are aspects of both but different from each other. So in this case, like the Buddhist ethics is, it has a utilitarian aspect, it has a deontological aspect at the same time.
Would you consider Taoism non-dualist?
Yes, Taoism is very much non-dualist.
I mean that almost, yeah, that is almost, it sounded
No. So that's what I'm saying. So Taoism is basically the non-dualism that existed in China before
and then
Buddhism
that's
got
why,
there. Buddhism got there. Buddhism found it very easy to merge with the non-dualists, or they were like, you're basically saying the same thing. Again, if you read Beckwith, he has some wild claims in that, where he says Taoism is basically just Buddhism. Like his idea is that, look,
that it didn't already exist. Because I mean, is Taoism older than Buddhism?
I'm not sure.
I don't know. Yeah,
Because his claim is that, look,
I mean, they're completely compatible to me.
yeah, exactly. He's like, they're okay. He's like, it's almost like the Pyrrhonism thing. It's almost the same. It's almost exactly like they're very similar, right? And he's like, but he's like, it's very possible that people were traveling after the birth of the Buddha, after the death of the Buddha, long before Buddhism like officially went to China and stuff. So it's entirely possible that sort of stories got passed along and just got bastardized along the way.
Sure, yeah.
And then the principle of the stories held on. And so then when the Buddhists officially went there, they were like, oh hey, you guys already like kind of have this thing. And so like, here's the real deal or whatever. Like, we don't know. It's fun to speculate on those things. But Taoism is definitely like, the concept of Wu Wei is detachment, right? It's what Martin Heidegger calls Gelassenheit, or releasement. So it's the I mean that's like that's the idea of Wu Wei being a sort of realization of how the world sort of the world of things like obstructs our flow, and then how we can like go with the flow. I'm reading this very interesting book by I think it's John Caputo. It's called The Mystical Element in Heidegger's Thought. Let me just look it up. Yeah, The Mystical Element in Heidegger's Thought. And it's really interesting. It talks about a lot about the non-dualism and the kind of ideas that there's an entire chapter on Zen Buddhism and Taoism and Heidegger, and like so it's a good thing. Another something interesting on the same sort of idea for you. Another interesting reading would be, I don't know how familiar you are with Heidegger. It's usually a bit daunting to read, but I find secondary literature on Heidegger is actually useful before going into the primary works, because if you don't know what he's like talking about, like, and that's the thing, like a lot of people who say that I find Heidegger difficult to read, I think are approaching it from a traditional like non-dualist or dualist perspective, where it's like materialism, and you're like, what is he even trying to say? But if you are familiar with non-dualism, what Heidegger is trying to say becomes a little bit easier to digest, right? Like if you're Cartesian and you're reading Heidegger, that's gonna be, you're gonna have a hard time. But if you're Humean and you're reading Heidegger, right, or you have experience with Hume, or you have experience with like with
No.
Kant probably. You asked about Kant
Yeah,
earlier, whether
Kant is
Kant was
yeah, that was one. I
non-dualist.
mean, that I mean, again, my philosophy is only a bachelor's. To me, that was my partly because of that's who my professors might have chosen, some of my previous professors. But yeah, like the Kant and Berkeley as well. Berkeley and Kant were, to me, largest influences. And yes, I do.
Berkeley, I would say, I'm not particularly familiar with Berkeley, but out of all of those European, like that age of sort of like empiricists kind of, I think Berkeley would be pretty sympathetic. Kant, on the other hand, is fascinating because like I used to be a critic of Kant like until like a year ago. Like I like Kant is, I was like, Kant, you're so close, but then you don't pull the trigger. Like you're there, you're on the precipice of something amazing with this transcendental function of reason, and saying like the fact that like, but Kant was not non-dualist,
Okay.
but as a transcendental idealist, right, which is also a kind of materialism if you flip it around, right? Because like for him, material, there's raw material outside, right? And then you get the data, and then it is synthesized into the finished cognition that we experience as qualia, right? Like the quanta comes in, it's processed, and then you get the qualia.
Yeah.
And reason only works within this sort of span, right? Part of that processing mechanism is our ideas of space and time, right? Like that. So space and time are not things out there, but they are the modes in which things appear to us as spatial and as temporal, right? And so we can use reason to question things in space and time, but we cannot use reason to question their spatiality or their temporality themselves, right? And then and so this sort of leads to the fact that yes, so then reason can't question beyond a certain point externally, and it can't question beyond a certain point internally because it sort of goes inside and it just can't. And so I see Kant as having these elements, definitely not. I mean, definitely having a Leibnizian German influence. But his most important quote for me is that Hume woke me from my dogmatic slumber, right? Which is like his reading of Hume is like once I understood and started picking out where in Kant I could see the Hume influence, I started to realize, and then when I read like Heidegger on Kant, I sort of understood more, right? Because Heidegger, according to Heidegger, all these thinkers who are thinking about the essence of being throughout the history, these essential thinkers, they're not saying it for themselves. Being is speaking through them. That's what Heidegger said. Like that's what his sort of belief is. Like philosophy is the world, being speaking through us humans as the only beings who can speak and speak this, right? And so throughout the ages, like the history of philosophy has been various iterations of us being speaking to us and us trying to articulate it in the right way. And I'm like now I get it. Like it wasn't that Kant got all this way and then he like didn't pull the trigger, right? Because Kant kind of leaves that cliffhangery thing, like at least in my mind, where it's like, yeah, critique of pure reason, yeah, so reason can do this, reason, yeah, but you can never really tell these are the illegitimate illegitimate operations for which reason cannot be. You cannot apply it to reason. And it's like, well, you kind of gave us this, kind of gave us that. The subject creates the object and also creates itself, and then there's the objective time order and the subjective time order. They both create. And I'm like, you can get those little things of he's struggling in the dualism of it. Like, he knows that dualism is a problem. He's struggling to break out of the non-dualism, out of the dualism into non-dualism. And Heidegger kind of plays with this, where he says that if you want to do something like that, you need a new language. Like, you can't express that in the language of the dualism, right?
Yeah.
Which is why Heidegger uses the capital B-E-I-N-G for the being of beings instead of just individual beings, which he writes with a lowercase b. But then later, Heidegger, when he realizes that being is nothing, he, like my professor told me this, there's time when he was scratching out in like his notebooks and stuff, because he literally understood you can't, if you really want to mean being, you can't say it because it is nothing. It's like striving to achieve shunyata. The more you try to say it, the more it sort of escapes you, because that is that concept, right? And that is what finally, when I read that, like, I looked back at Kant in like a sympathetic way. Like, Kant is not pulling the trigger. He's trying so hard to pull the trigger that it is escaping it. Maybe it's constantly escape. Yeah, right. It's the exact thing. Which is why, like, that is why I like Hume, because Hume, instead of falling into that he realizes the regression that induction can take you into, and he's like, no, that is the problem with philosophy. That if you try to answer the problem of human nature by going away from human nature and trying to answer it as if it's one, like a thing like many others, and just trying, that's not going to work. Because when we try to study human nature as if it, like, logically, and we come to the understanding that human nature, human reasoning, human reason, logic has no logical deductive justification itself, which is the problem of induction. He's like, that is painful. That is that's not something that philosophy is accustomed to, right? So when that happens, then the philosophers turn away, and the answer is some sort of dogmatism, where it's like, oh yeah, the reason exists because of God, being exists because of God, or whatever, right? But it takes real guts to sort of look at the stare back at the abyss, so to speak, and be like, yeah, I'm completely okay with human rationality being irrationally grounded. Right? And that is what when he says that it is psychological, that we are inductive, it is our psychology, right? It's not, it's him stepping out of the need to justify things rationally. And where if it's not rational, it's irrational. And he's like, no, it's not irrational, it's irrational. There's right, and this is the same kind of thing, like that. If you're not rational, then you're irrational.
Yeah, but
why? He's like, right? Like, he's like that. Like, emotions aren't like, and that's kind of like how we think of it, right? We think of like rationality as cold and calculated and set aside from the emotions, which are irrational, which are impulsive, and he's like, but what Piro shows is in fact the other way around. Piro shows that our reason is, in a way, most pathetic of all, because it is rooted in our pathes, our passions, right? So but the reason why we want materialism to be right, or we want idealism to be right, is because
connection to rationalism,
right, is because we feel somewhere deep down that materialism is right, and or idealism is right. And Piro's like, if you question that and figure out why you want materialism to be right, and you figure out why you want idealism to be right, you'll find out that the reason is the same.
Yeah.
And then when you tackle that reason, you'll realize you don't really want either of them to be right. You
Yeah.
don't really care if
Yeah,
either of them
exactly,
is right.
yeah.
Right? And it's like that. It's like when you sort of just like dualism is being locked in,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And in the moment, like in it, but non-dualism is like sort of stepping out. Like, okay, dualism is red corner and blue corner, right? Non-dualism is, and when you're in the red corner, the only person you care about is the blue corner. When you're in the blue corner, the only person you care about is the red corner and your own corner.
Yeah.
But when you're looking at it from outside, you also realize there's a referee there, right? And the referee is, it's not a monism, right? The referee's not, it's
Yeah.
not a side.
Yeah.
The referee is not a side in the contest. The referee is not on the red side either. It's not on the blue side either. And the referee is not a third side. They're not going to take away the prize, right? The referee's there simply separating the two sides, keeping the blue corner on the blue corner, the red corner on the red corner, and making sure that they stay within their limits, and nobody goes against each other, right? But they're as equally important part of the fight. Without the referee, the fight wouldn't happen. It'd just be a backyard brawl, right? So the referee is definitely a part of, and this goes for any game, right? For any sport, the referee is a referee because they're impartial. They're not on either side, but they can penalize either side, right?
Yeah.
They can penalize both sides. They
Yeah.
can affect. They're not part of either side, but they can affect both sides. And without whom you wouldn't have any criterion to make the rules or enforce them, right? Because it's not like if there's no referee, one team is going to be like, oh yeah, one of our guys can be the referee, because the other person will not. They'll be like, that's not fair. Well, we get one of our guys to be the referee. Well, that's not fair. You always need a third who's not involved, right? So I think non-dualism is sort of like that. Like we live in a world where we're entrenched in dualism either way, right? You have broadly, you have your scientists who are mostly some sort of materialist.
Yeah.
They might be idealists in some way, but mostly they're materialists. They believe the answers to the world are found in the material world. Then you have your idealists who think that the answers to the world are found outside of this world. And then you have your non-dualists who believe that both of these are futile sort of chases. Like, it's good to do science and it's good to have faith, right? It's good, like if going to the temple and doing your religious thing gives you happiness and gives you peace and brings you, whatever, like gives you the strength to go on, great. And if doing science is fun for you, it brings it brings utility.
Whatever. Yeah, I mean, yeah,
exactly, right. It
Practical.
brings benefits to people's lives or whatever, brings security. Do it. But the ism is to argue that this is the be all end all, that this is the solution to all the problems, and this is the solution to all the problems. And non-dualism is like, yeah, if you guys weren't arguing, we probably wouldn't have problems, like as many problems in the first place, right? If you guys were, if religion wasn't fighting science and science wasn't fighting religion, then science would understand that religion started off pretty scientific back in the day, and science will understand that religion will understand that science is now becoming a religion.
Absolutely,
sort of its own, right? So like, I don't know, I think non-dualism is just it's a way of looking at the world, I think.
Absolutely. I have two things that we haven't covered that I'd like to. If you still have time, you're good.
Oh yeah, I think so. We're good.
All right, good. There's a couple things. One, of course, actually, originally, when we were talking, is talk about martial arts. So, So these are more personal questions. One, give me a little background on the martial arts, and then there was one, then there was there's also now I've got to find writing down. You said something that was really interesting about, when you you kind of came to a realization of you were the only, I think these are connected to the martial arts, that you were the limit to yourself.
Mm-hmm.
That's related kind of to
Yeah.
martial arts. That was kind of, that might have even been the spark to do martial arts, or
Yeah.
give me that, fill in the blanks there.
Okay, so I've always kind of lived my life not wanting to know what I wanted to do, right? But I've always been surrounded by people who know what they want to do. And so growing up, my like every time people asked me what I wanted to do, my reply was always with what I didn't want to do.
Okay.
Like, I don't want to be an engineer. I don't want to be a doctor. I don't want to do this. I don't want to do that. Right. And so in that way, I was always sort of finding myself through limiting myself, trying to find things and do things that other people didn't usually do. The other thing is I found out pretty like early is that I kind of have a knack for like picking up things and being pretty okay at them. Like
New things, new activities, new
like
skills.
say like guitar or like I'm pretty good at like drawing or doodling and like sketching and like comic book stuff, but never good enough to like
that's
either so that's what I'm saying, either never good enough to take it seriously, or I never gave myself the chance to take it seriously, right? So I have a bunch of hobbies, right, which I can pull out one out of a hat to like impress someone if I need, like if I'm sitting somewhere and I'm like, I'll just start drawing like Batman, and someone's like on the bus will be like, oh yeah, that's a cool drawing, like I'll feel good, right? Or like I'll be at a place, like I can pick up a guitar and I can start just doodling away and improvising it, right? So I found myself always being, instead of picking one thing and being really good at it, I found myself doing multiple things all the time, a little bit. And so in that sense, I think I limited myself, but still gained something through it. And my interdisciplinary like academics was also like the same kind of thing, where I took a little bit of courses from everywhere, but never really sort of continued doing that jack of all trades kind of thing. Now, one of the things that I sort of limited myself, and maybe this was to a more detrimental consequence, was that I was never interested in like sports or exercise of any sort, even as a kid. Now it was different, but until the age of like 27, 26, 27, I did not do like any exercise. My mom put me through like various kinds of after school classes. I went for tennis, football, soccer. I played I did karate for like 3 years. But at every in every class, every sport, I remember either getting bored, right, or not wanting to put myself through the physical. Like I was good at the tennis. Like I was good at the tennis class. I was good at tennis enough for the coach to put me in like the intermediate batch on my first day. But then I didn't want to go through like the warm up and the push ups and like the exercise and that kind of stuff, right? So I would do this for a while, then quit, and then like not go to those classes. And then
3 years
around the same time,
is that longer? That sounds like a decent length.
I mean, 3 years of karate in like from like 2000 2003 to 2006.
Okay.
Like I was like it was, I don't even know if it was like a real like how much real stuff that we were like
Yeah, yeah.
learning, right? Like I got up to an orange belt. That's or green belt or one of the like it hasn't I remember the basics now,
Mhm.
but it hasn't really affected me that much like right now. Like I'm not really like holding on to anything from that thing. Um but I do remember it was I remember sort of it was Goju Ryu karate, which means hard and soft style.
Okay.
So I remember then as well being fascinated by what hard and soft means, and now like I
But that's interesting.
understand.
Wait, where was that? I had I had we call it kosho rule, but that might be sound be the same. But that was they call it like it's like whitewashed karate. I mean, karate technically that's Japanese, like Okinawan karate, Kyokushin.
Mhm.
But
Yeah,
that's going to be the hard soft, and it's going to be more like the we call it Chinese kimpo. But then I look at the etymology there is weird,
because like
but it would be a mixture between the. I mean,
yeah. So well, from what I understood, like the hard and soft was like the hard was like the hard strikes, and the
yeah,
soft is like the deflecting sort of
yeah.
circular motion strikes, right? And so again, I didn't know this then. I learned this much later now. Right?
Okay.
Like I was like, which is why like sometimes I feel like I should have started doing martial arts earlier,
Mhm.
but then maybe my friend was like, it's maybe it's a good thing that you're a late bloomer. Like you're at a place where you can actually like do the do the martial arts because you want to do it, not because your parents sent you to a
Yeah,
class,
yeah.
right? So anyway, I just started to become this kind of person in middle school and high school who was just like, no, I'm not a sports person. That's not my thing, right? I'm just not a sporty person. So I just myself started withdrawing from most physical and activity, and I was overall just kind of like a skinny fit guy, so I didn't really need to do anything of that sort. Um, and then really, I just like did barely any physical exercise for years. Walking, I walked a decent amount. That's it. But like barely any stretching, very bad posture, bad, no weight training, nothing of that sort or anything. Um, and it wasn't until I was 27 when I was here, sorry, 28 when I was here in Tampa that I started actually getting into uh, the martial arts, and that was because uh, I got uh, I got diagnosed with really high cholesterol levels, and so they were like, you got to take care of your health, you got to take care of your food and exercise. And I was like, I'm like, I don't like exercising. I still had that like the old thing, like I don't like doing
Yeah.
the weight training and like the push-ups and stuff. I need something fun
Hmm.
to do, right? And so when a friend of mine suggested, he's like, hey, I know some like the basics of boxing that I learned this one summer. So he's like, I got some spare gloves, so I can teach you. So I said, okay. So we just in my apartment complex, we just started training just basic boxing. Then we started adding like basic kicks, and then what happened was I started liking how it felt, like liking how um like I felt I was a good fit for it. Like my technique was good. I was able to like naturally get into the right technique. I was able to maintain the right technique. Um, I it helped me improve like my cardio. Um, and then as I saw that I was getting good at it, it made me want to do more. Like then I started like, no, I started seeing the utility of like, oh yeah, I want to do squats and I want to do mobility training. I want to do push-ups and stuff like that because it will help in like flexibility and mobility in martial arts, or it'll help with strength and it'll help with conditioning and stuff like that. And then I started just trying out stuff on my own through YouTube, and started just training on my own. Around the same time that I got into the non-dualism thing, I started reading about Bruce Lee more in detail.
Yeah, I was just gonna ask about that.
Yeah, and then like that basically brought me to the same, like it all sort of hit at the same time when I saw what Bruce Lee was saying is non-dualism in fighting. That's what he's talking about. And I mean, I have the poster on my door, right? The like be like water, right? It's like no form is the best form, no shape is or shapelessness is the best shape. So there's no like there's attack and defense, right? But attack and defense only happen
Yeah.
at
Right.
interception,
Yeah.
right? Yeah, and the interception, like the horizon, is it's not a thing. Like the interception requires the two sides. Without them, there's just empty space. You're not like it's the beginning of an exchange
Yeah.
and the end of the exchange when you like draw out. But at the beginning of the exchange, that's all that matters, right? Getting in, getting out. And so I started learning more about that. I started learning more. I basically what I decided is that I want to try understanding this philosophically, like as a like that's my strength as a philosopher, to understand this system sort of from the ground up. I may not understand it as a martial artist, but that's for later. First, I want to understand the philosophy of it. And then as I was doing that, I was understanding what he's talking about, where he's bringing it from, where he's looking at all these different styles, bringing it in, and all of that. I met people on my on campus who also just trained on their own in the campus gym, and there was a bag and there was a mat room, and so then we started just training. I had some mitts, and then we started just doing mitt workouts and bag workouts and just light sparring and stuff like that. And it's been pretty great. My friend had uh, a point fighting tournament this past weekend, so I was helping him train for that last week. So it was pretty fun. We don't go too hard. It's just everyone wants to just practice technique and stuff like that. And yeah.
Have you dabbled with grappling and jujitsu or wrestling or?
I've wanted to. There's a jujitsu and a judo club on campus, but until now my timings weren't compatible with those with their meetings. So hopefully this semester it works out and I can go. But the thing with grappling is I want to try it, but I'm also just like viscerally like uncomfortable with someone being like that close, like that close to me, and like it
That's
like
why you gotta get, yeah.
I get really like
Oh,
ticklish.
absolutely. No,
Like, so
that's there. Got to.
like, but I'm sure you have to like once you get into it, like everyone's told me, like once you like
Yeah.
really start getting into it, it's a lot of fun. So like I've seen those, like we train with those guys sometimes, like we train kickboxing
Yeah.
with the guys, and so they've invited me a couple of times, but the
Yeah.
timings have never
Oh,
matched.
okay, yeah.
But
No, if you get the opportunity, I mean, it definitely will. I mean, it is uncomfortable to that extent, but then, yeah, like, I mean, the only limit is yourself. But it is so. I mean, yeah, it's. I think it's an essential part of martial arts is the grappling part aspect, and it's. I mean, yeah, and it is. But again, I mean, it's fun to look at it from a philosophical standpoint too, not just the attack and the defense. At what point, what is, I mean, because in boxing, you'll still do grappling moves, shoulder shrugs, and so it's
right.
You can still look at it from a non-dualist perspective of what's grappling, what's striking, and then
But like that's the thing about grappling, right? Is that unlike kickboxing, like you can practice. Like I'm not saying you can learn how to fight, but you can practice kickboxing alone at home.
yeah,
You can practice getting your punch technique right. You can have a bag at home. You can practice your kicks. You can stretch your kicks. You can do all. You can't really practice wrestling or grappling at home on your own. You need a mat. You need a partner. You need someone who knows what they're doing. The risk of injury, like neck injury and all that, is more. So because I didn't really have that it was much easier for me to learn when I was alone, to learn all that on my own.
That's
But now that, like I said, like I have a network, and like we're gonna start, like when fall starts, a couple more people are gonna be, we'll have more people going, so it'll be way more fun.
yeah.
But
On the thing that makes grappling so advantageous, of course you do need somebody, but you can spar hard. While in striking, you can't really spar hard. You can hit the bag hard,
right.
but you can never really go. So you never really get to
Right.
test yourself unless you do it.
Right. That, yeah, I have noticed that. When I watch online and stuff, like all the sparring rolling sessions, they like everyone's going all out, almost all out every round.
Yeah. So that part I think is good. I mean, it's so with how long would you consider yourself have been a non-dualist? I mean, you came across it as in bachelor, degree.
No, I came across it in when I was doing my bachelor's, right?
Considered yourself or whatever you've been.
No. So yeah, so that's what I was saying. Like when I was studying my bachelor's, I was still in like the philosophy of science kind of thing, because I was still reeling from like being pushed away from the whole religious aspect of being atheist. And so I really didn't want anything to do with Indian philosophy and stuff like that. I found it interesting, but at that point I still wanted to do something useful in philosophy and not waste my time with the abstract, too heavy, too deep stuff. Which is what I feel is like limiting myself. Like I could always hear it sort of calling out to me, and so I sort of let it be, and then I only picked it up again like maybe 2 years ago now. But then ever since then, like it was as if like a valve had opened up. Like so much stuff from my past, like opinions I had about things, but I never really knew how to like vocalize them, because they were like, I didn't know how to articulate non-dualist ideas in a dualist sense. Like they made sense, where I'm like, no, I'm not a relativist. It's different. I'm not sitting on the fence. I think the fence is a stupid idea, which is being put up because you guys, like, there is no fence. Right. Like, so like it just made it like atheism, for example. Like that was one of the, like, I non-dualism made me realize that I wasn't an atheist. Like, or I'm not an atheist. I was driven so far apart from the religious theism into atheism. And only years later, I realized that the atheism is just as much a belief as theism. And then I look on Twitter and I see theists and atheists just arguing. Like, and to me, it's just like, wow, this is
dualism.
this is so pointless. Like, the atheists are just these militant science tech bros, and the religious people are just, well, whatever. So I'm like, neither of you guys are right, but neither of you guys even sees the problem. And I don't really have enough energy to even want to step into that, right? So like that's like people are complaining about like, oh yeah, I can only view 600 tweets a day, and I'm like, I'm barely viewing like 6 before I run out of energy, and I'm like, nah, I'm done with this.
No, I haven't got to that level yet. I saw that pop up, but I thought I scrolled through a lot. Does that mean, I think I scrolled through probably a lot. I've never reached a point where it said I have scrolled past. I don't know if every
your video is frozen. I don't know why.
Oh, is it? Oh, I wonder if my still frozen. Good to me.
Okay, now it's good.
Okay. Well, yeah, it's like 1:30 a.m. for me here, but I don't have anything to do tomorrow. Particularly, I really appreciate you meeting up and talking philosophy and everything.
No problem.
I hope, if you're free, anything, we'll do it again, and anything about martial arts. I mean, there's still a lot of avenues I'd like to go down.
Yeah, we can do it again. I'd love to talk more. Like, we can do another one where we're talking more about the martial arts stuff. because this one was focused more on like philosophy and
Yeah,
stuff.
which
So
actually that was actually more important, I think, for to change it up actually, because yeah, most of the people I've talked to so far are people who I've trained with and stuff. We talk about that, but
yeah,
what's so interesting is that all of I would say my martial art friends are deeply in philosophy, and they love to talk philosophy with me, and I love talking about philosophy with it. I mean, to me, and that was originally what was your question, like that, or not question, comment about just the relationship between. You said something about it's interesting to see that, and I'm just like, yeah, I mean, they're inseparable. I mean, martial arts is and philosophy are just
yeah.
so,
I just want to say one thing, right? And this is like people, what people think philosophy is, like generally, like people think philosophy is, and what philosophers do, or what doing philosophy means. Um, and then there's like actually like doing philosophy, like doing the difficult readings, and like this is what I noticed from like my students, right? When uh I make them do the readings, and like they come to class having done the readings as if they're in like a STEM class, and I'm like, no, you gotta do the readings like line by line, sit with a pencil, make annotations, underline. Like you can't, this isn't, you can't just like skim this, because like I'm gonna ask you questions about like how to interpret things, so you like you better read, right? So they're not used to reading, right? So like I said, like one of the things I ensure in all my classes is that you have no homework but doing the reading, so you better damn do them well. Like all other assignments and all other homework is done there, all other assignments are done in class except for the final one, which is done at the end of the semester. So during the class, all you have to do is, during the week, is go home and do the readings for the next class, right? And because then like now you have no excuse, right? Like you can't say I also had to do this. No, from my side, I've reduced all the burden that I can, right? So now you have to read, and so when they like actually they have to
papers
read.
too, so that works out for you. I mean,
Yeah, so I have them. We're doing Aristotle's physics right now, and it's a night class. It runs from 5 to 8:30 p.m. So I have only like 8 students in my class. So it's pretty good. Even though it's an intro to philosophy class, I can kind of run it like a seminar, where I do the intro, like the first like part of the reading, and then I've given them passages to read and analyze. And I'm like, on Monday's class, each of you is going to analyze like your passage. It's like a page long, and you're going to explain it to the class. Right? And I'm going to grade you on that. Like it's going to be challenging. And I'm like, it seems like it's really fast, but it's summer. We have 6 weeks. That's 12 classes. Each class is like 3.5 hours. So the turnaround time is going to be fast. So I like nobody can help it. That's how the timing is. That, and then the other thing I want to say about non-dualism is just even, or especially about how dualism looks at non-dualism. Like the fact that the Buddhism or the Buddha's way is called the middle way, the middle path, right? Is like, it's a misnomer. Like it shouldn't be. Right? Like it's a middle path between this idealism or this eternalism of the Hindu way, and the sort of annihilationism or the materialism of the hedonist. And it's not a middle path in the sense that it lies somewhere in the middle. It's a different path that takes the same thing. It takes part of this and part of that, but then still says that both are wrong. Right? Like, so it like I guess it's semantically it's right that it is the middle way, but I think the way that we conceptualize as the middle is like, it's as if it's like a third thing, but no, it's middle, like the line that runs between the yin and yang that makes the yin and the yang separate, right?
that's like that Taoism and Buddhism and
That's always
dualism is so just compatible. Like the feeling of when I read something Taoist or something, and it's like that it resonates with Buddhism for sure.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Well, have a good, what time now? Your
Like 2:30
afternoon, early
p.m.
afternoon.
Yeah.
All right. Excellent. Thanks. Yeah. We'll talk again. See
Have
you.
a good night.
All right.
Thank you. Bye bye.
Bye.